Recently, a number of high-profile people have been calling for a universal basic income.
We should explore ideas like universal basic income to make sure that everyone has a cushion to try new ideas.
I do think there's a pretty good chance we end up with a universal basic income or something like that due to automation.
Today, I'd like to share a big idea with you. In fact, I believe it could be one of the biggest ideas of the 21st century.
It's even got its own website. But what is a universal basic income? And is it a good idea? According to basicincome.org, a basic income is a periodic cash payment unconditionally delivered to all on an individual basis without means test or work requirement. It has these 5 characteristics. It's periodic, so it's paid at regular intervals, i.e. every month or every week. It's paid in cash, so it's not paid in food stamps or other vouchers that you can exchange for goods and services. It's paid on an individual basis, so it's not paid to families or households or other groups. It's universal, so it's paid without means test. And it's unconditional, so it's paid without a requirement to work or even a willingness to work. So basically, it's just free money for everyone. What a great idea, right? Who doesn't want free money? I want free money. Bring on the free money! There are 3 main arguments being made for it. Firstly, that technology is going to take people's jobs, so we need to compensate them for that. Secondly, it'll help fight inequality. And finally, it's a lot more simple than the current welfare schemes that most Western nations have. I'm not too concerned with the technology will take our jobs argument. They took our job! They took our job! It has been made before, and there's no evidence to suggest that people won't find jobs in other fields. Just as an example, about half the labour force worked on farms barely 200 years ago until technology took their jobs.
Oh, they took our jobs!
They took your job! They took your job! They took your job! Since then, the population has boomed and the vast majority of people don't work on farms anymore. Yes, new technology can kill some jobs, but the increases in production that new tech brings allows for new jobs in other industries. I explain this in more detail in my Say's Law video, which you can check out here. As for inequality, beware the scoundrel who tries to argue that one person having more than another person is bad in its own right. Especially when a billionaire who has a big wall around his home to keep the riffraff out is lecturing at you about it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with inequality of outcome. In fact, in some things, it's the entire point. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that welfare actually creates inequality as opposed to reducing it, and I'll probably do a video on this in the future as the topic is quite in depth. In my opinion, the argument for simplicity has more to back it up than the other two, as being able to reduce administration and time costs associated with welfare spending can only be a good thing. The questions we really need to ask is how much will it cost and how effective will it be? Using the US as our example, let's break it down. Keeping in mind that the numbers I'm using are just estimates, but for the purposes of this video they're close enough. US census data has the average household at about 2.5 to 2.6 people. And the US Department of Health and Human Services website states that the average poverty rate for a household of 2.5 people is around about $18,500 per year, or $6,160 per person per year. The current population of the United States is about 326 million people. Multiplying that by $6,160 per person per year, that gives us an annual cost of over $2 trillion, which is more than half of current federal government spending. If this was simply added to the budget, what would that do to the bottom line? The US is already almost in $20 trillion worth of debt. Clearly just adding this to the budget isn't reasonably possible, although I'm sure some politicians would try if they could. So what happens if we replace all current welfare spending in the US with the UBI? In 2017, welfare is estimated to cost about $1.39 trillion. If that was converted into a universal basic income, it would mean everyone gets $4,263 per year, or $82 per week. In order to pay people enough to get them over the poverty rate, you'd still need to find another $600 to $700 billion. Given the fact that as of 2015, the average social security claim in the US was about $1,300 per month, these people would also see their incomes halved. Then there's the small matter of the current deficit, which is edging up towards $700 billion anyway. So is it a good idea? Well, that depends. If you just add to current spending, it's a horrible idea that will bankrupt any nation that already has a welfare state. If you want to replace all current welfare spending, there is maybe a case for it. It's just that people on welfare right now will have to make do with a lot less, will have to find a job, or their children will have to take care of them. In my opinion, it's just another socialist idea that hasn't been thought out and doesn't take into account the actual cost of doing it. Like all socialist ideas, the people pushing it ignore where the money is supposed to come from and instead just assume that taxpayers can be milked for even more money. If Mark Zuckerberg gave every single cent of Facebook's revenue to the UBI, it would mean everyone in the United States received $86 per year. And I don't see him volunteering any money to pay for it, do you? So at the end of the day, I think this isn't the best of ideas, but we can still put it in the maybe pile as it would make welfare a little bit more efficient. I'm just going to leave the video with Milton Friedman explaining another idea for welfare, something called the negative income tax, and I'll likely do a video on this in the future as well.
The idea of the negative income tax is to treat people who are poor in the same way as we treat people who are rich. Both groups would have to file income tax returns, and both groups would be treated in parallel way. Under current law, if you or I file an income tax return and we have, let's say, I were a family of four, head of a family of four, to take a simple case.
Which in fact you do.
Well, I am, but as it happens, my children are growing up and they're not very good as, no good to me anymore as income tax deductions. That's one of the troubles with you kids growing up. Your parents lose you as a deduction.
And you don't tithe their earnings?
No, I'm afraid I don't tithe their earnings, and I'm afraid in the modern day the parents continue to contribute to the children instead of the other way around. But if I were still head of a family of four, I would be entitled to an exemption of $3,000 without paying a tax. That is, if I had an income of $3,000, I would have an exemption of $3,000, I would pay no tax. If I had an income of $4,000, I would have a positive taxable income of $1,000. I would be required to pay a tax on that $1,000. Suppose I have an income of $2,000. Then by the same arithmetic, I have a negative taxable income of $1,000. Minus $1,000 is my taxable income. The idea of the negative income tax is to apply a tax rate to that minus $1,000 and give a man a subsidy in proportion to it. For example, the highest rate, it seems to me, at all feasible to use would be 50%, and it makes it simple for arithmetic. Let's suppose a rate were 50%. Then if I had an income of $2,000 with a family of four, I would be entitled to receive half of that $1,000 back. That is, I would get back $500 and end up with an income of $2,500 available to me. If I had zero income, if I had no income at all, then I would have a negative taxable income of minus $3,000. I would be entitled to receive half of that, or $1,500. And in this way, this program would say nobody in the country, no family of four in the country, shall have a smaller amount than $1,500 available for it for its purposes of consumption. That would be the negative income tax.